Good morning. It is February the 24th, and we are still sleeted under, so to speak. I hope everyone is warm and safe this morning. We will continue our discussion about Giotto. So again, you'll need to go into Google Classroom. You'll click classwork, then you'll scroll down to the very bottom to space, and you'll click on, I'm putting these lecture slides in both the Early Renaissance lecture slide activity, so you'll see them here. This is the PowerPoint that we're looking at, and then you can go ahead and watch each video in order. This is video 1, this is video 2, video 3, and this is video 4. These were the 4 videos that I built for yesterday. So we're going to go ahead and start with today, and I'll add them. And I've also added them in the study guide activity as well, so you can access them there also. Now we'll go ahead and click into the PowerPoint, and again, remember, you have to click open with Google Slides to be able to see my lecture notes. So you should have your Early Renaissance study guide, so you can take notes on the slides the 10 slides that I have inside of there. All right, so we looked at Pisano, his Florence Cathedral doors on the south side of the baptistry. And we looked at Duccio's work, his Maesta altarpiece, and some details from the altarpiece. Then we looked at Simone Martini's work yesterday, Christ Carrying the Cross, his Saint Ensances altarpiece. This was the first image in the slide study guide that you had to write facts about. We looked at his Maesta, and then we looked at the work of Cimabue, and a fresco that is in Assisi, and the Madonna enthroned, the crucifixion. And today we're going to look at Giotto. Giotto is one of my favorite artists to talk about. He made more of a radical break from the past than Duccio or the other artists that we've discussed, in the past being Byzantine style art. His figures are more volumetric rather than linear, and they move with the narrative scene, and they express profound emotion compared to other figures that have been painted in the past. Now, Giovanni Villani was a Florentine chronicler, and he recorded that Giotto was the most sovereign master of painting in his time, who drew all his figures and their postures according to nature. Remember when I've told you that when you're copying something, whatever you're copying, whether it be a photograph or another image, that becomes your teacher. That image becomes your teacher. Well, if you're copying nature, if you go outside and you draw the tree in your front yard, you're copying the tree in your front yard. That tree becomes your teacher. Nature becomes your teacher, okay? If you're drawing your friend becomes your teacher. Your friend is nature. You are nature, okay? We are part of this world. We're natural beings. So he understood that, and he looked to nature as his teacher. So his fame continued undiminished, such that some 2 centuries later, 200 years later, the high Renaissance art historian Vasari could write, he made a decisive break with the crude traditional Byzantine style and brought to life the great art of painting as we know it today, introducing the technique of drawing accurately from life, which had been neglected for more than 200 years. Okay, so the sources of Giotto's style are still debated, although one must have been the style of the Roman school of painting represented by Pietro Cavallini. His work depicted a sculptural rendering of the form. Cavallini abandoned Byzantine linearism for a soft, deep modeling from light to dark of the human form. Another formative influence on Giotto may very well have been the work of the man presumed to be his teacher, Giovanni Cimabue, which we just looked at Cimabue's work. Now, Cimabue was from Florence. He must have been an older rival of Giotto. They would have competed for jobs. Okay, they would have competed for artwork to make for different people. So like Cavallini, Cimabue was inspired by the same impulse towards naturalism as Pisano, and also influenced, no doubt, by Gothic sculpture that pushed beyond the limits of the Italo-Byzantine style. And I haven't shown you any Gothic sculpture, and it's really, really fun to look at. The forms really get volumetric. Despite all of the influences that helped to provide Giotto's artistic education, his natural ability was informed by nature, the world around him, which he visually took in. His new style of painting makes him the father of Western pictorial art. So all artwork that moves forward in the Western canon is going to be influenced by the artwork of Giotto, okay? Michelangelo, Leonardo, all of those famous Renaissance artists are all going to be influenced by the work of Giotto. Now, he was renowned in his day, and his reputation has never faltered. His revolution in painting did not consist only of the final displacement of the Byzantine style, away with the Byzantine style, out with the old, in with the new, okay? But also of the establishment of painting as a major art for the next 6 centuries, for the next 600 years. All right, now, and the restoration of the naturalistic approach invented by the ancients that was lost in the Middle Ages. And I'm talking about the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans. All right. Giotto showed his generation a new way of seeing. With Giotto, Western man turned toward the visible world as a source of knowledge of nature. This new outward vision replaced the medieval inward vision that searched not for the secrets of nature, but for union with God. Okay. Prior to that, during the medieval period, they focused on the inner spirit, and now we're going to have a focus on what's in nature itself. All right. Let's go ahead and look at, this is the Madonna enthroned with angels. And let me go ahead and put this in slideshow view, so hopefully you can see part of this image a little bit in more detail. Giotto's revolution in painting was directed against the prevailing Italo-Byzantine style, which blended late Gothic with Byzantine influences. So he turned this painting style, which is two-dimensional, it has height and width, with its two-dimensional lifeless quality, into a three-dimensional art characterized by naturalism and the full expression of human emotion. Through the innovative uses of light and shade and the placement of figures as to create depth, Giotto was able to paint realistic-looking individuals rather than flat, ornamental depictions found in most of the illuminated manuscripts or Italian paintings that would have been found in churches along the altars. Now, this Madonna appears to be actively sitting on her throne, and the surrounding angels with their faces full of wonder and awe give a sense of depth in the way they are placed in overlapping space. So revolutionary in the composition as well as in expressive and spatial dimensions, it has been called the most influential painting of the 14th century. Let's go ahead and look at St. Francis preaching to the birds. And I had mentioned St. Francis earlier. St. Francis was from Assisi. This is the 15th of 28 scenes, 25 of which were painted by Giotto, of the legend of St. Francis. The two scenes on the entrance wall, this is in Assisi in Italy, and this is in the lower church, and I've been in this church, and I've been able to look at this image, and it's one of the most memorable experiences I've ever had in my life, sitting in this church and looking at the artwork of this great master. It was a spiritual experience, certainly. Now, the two scenes on the entrance wall when you first walk in are the Miracle of the Spring and the Sermon to the Birds. And this is the Sermon to the Birds, okay? These compositions were created by Giotto. St. Francis came, a little bit about St. Francis, he came across a flock of birds that did not fly away at his approach. Usually a flock of birds is going to fly away when you get near. Well, these birds did not. He gave a sermon to the expectantly waiting creatures who only left the saint after receiving his blessing. So they waited, they listened to a sermon, and once he blessed them, then they left, okay? As so often, Giotto makes plain the extraordinary nature of events through the reaction of a secondary figure, in this case through the Franciscan friar, who is St. Francis, who raises his hand with a surprised expression on his face. St. Francis was from Assisi, and that's in the Tuscany region in Italy. It's kind of in the middle of Italy. He was the founder of the Franciscan order of the Catholic Church. He was born in 1181, okay, long time ago. When he was born, his dad, Pietro, had gone on a trip to France and was furious to find out that his wife had baptized their newborn son, calling him Giovanni after John the Baptist. He did not want his son to be a man of God, but a businessman, a cloth merchant like he was, and he especially wanted a son who would reflect his infatuation with France. He renamed his son Francesco, which is the equivalent of calling him a Frenchman. Since his dad was wealthy, he grew up with a very rich, easy life, okay? You ever hear of the rich kid? Yeah, he was the rich kid, okay? Everyone loved him. He was even too easy for his own good. No one tried to control or correct him when he was wrong. And unfortunately, if you don't discipline people, they get unruly and full of themselves and create bad habits, okay? So, as a consequence, he became a leader of a crowd of young people who spent their nights at wild parties. He fell right into the footsteps his father had hoped, even falling in love with France. He was a dreamer, but was good at business. He wanted more in life, though, more than wealth. He wanted to be a noble knight. Battle was the best place to win the glory and prestige he had longed for. He wanted to be a warrior. He got his chance when Assisi basically went into battle with another city-state. Now remember, I told you that these cities in Italy were called city-states. And if one city nearby did something to upset another city, they may take up arms against each other and fight. Well, that's basically what had happened. And what St. Francis did